Hello, my name is Sam Slatcher. I'm a singer-songwriter and community music practitioner. Today's lecture has been recorded on the inaugural launch of the Northern Saints Trails. I'm on the Way of Learning, which goes from Jarrow to Durham Cathedral, and I'm midway through, which is a beautiful place called Finkel Abbey, which is a 13th century abbey in ruins, as you can see, which is halfway along. It's about 4 miles outside of Durham. So today's lecture is all about the power of music in pilgrimage. I'm going to take us through this particular trail and its musical links from Jarrow and the monastery and the early 12th century Gregorian chants, as well as some of the ancient Celtic music. I'll take us through Godric, St Godric, who is obviously a hermit associated with this place. And then I'm going to share with you some of my own music, which is inspired by themes of pilgrimage and journeying. And we'll finish with a song. In 2017, I finished a PhD at Durham University, which was all about how creative practitioners bring communities together through art. And I was looking at the context of West Yorkshire, so people from different faith backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, and how they come together through art. It was during this time that I discovered that my own artistic practice, which is music, has an incredible ability to bring people together, to break down barriers, to allow people to emotionally respond to themselves and each other, and also feel a sense of rootedness in place. So following this PhD, I practiced it myself. I had some funding from the Arts Council to run a project in Durham called Stories of Sanctuary, which brought together people from refugee backgrounds and others who are seeking sanctuary in some way in the city, in the county of Durham, but also in the city of Durham. Following the success of that project, I set up Songwriters, which is a social enterprise that has the strapline "Creating Social Harmony Through Music." And the idea here is that we're writing songs together, that citizens, anyone can write music, whether you believe you're a musician or not. Stories are at the heart of what it means to be human, and music is only an expression of that. So the idea of citizen songwriters is that we come together and we create music about the places we live and the people we live with. There have been two things I've discovered. One is that music is tied to people and places. The songs that survive are the ones that draw on people's experiences of place. And obviously that's the great tradition of folk music. Folk music is all about people's stories. It's an archival kind of work in some ways, and many of the histories we know about are through music and storytelling. And the second thing, particularly relating to the trails, is that creativity happens on the move. Whether it's the encounters with people or the circumstances, that sense of thrown togetherness, to quote a geographer, one of my favourite geographers, it's the unpredictable nature of walking together and encountering the world that brings up these unique moments. So obviously today it's the 17th of May, this is the first day we could literally meet together in groups of up to 30 outdoors. So this is very much the beginning of this project. And so today I have more questions than I have answers. It's a kind of an opening rather than a conclusion, but I hope today that you're going to learn something about the power of music, some of the stories from the past, but as well as the possibility of coming together and creating music. So hopefully if you come back in a year's time, you might see a project that is full of stories and new communities coming together and writing music. So as I began walking around the trails, I discovered not only the historical stories that are documented so well by David Pott, who's the tour coordinator of the Northern Saints Trails, and you can find all the information on the website in the link below, but I also discovered the stories that you encounter on the route that no one can necessarily tell you. And this kind of led me to the idea of walking and writing along the trails, to see if I could capture some of these stories with the support of the social enterprise that I run, and exploring songwriting as a means of well-being as well as rootedness to place, and a way of opening up the spaces around us to explore and discover. So the questions that I'm asking in this project are: who are the saints that have left their mark on our northeast landscape? Whether they're religious figures, or whether they are pioneers, or whether they are people who have served their community in some way or another. I also want to ask, who are today's saints? And particularly the year we've had, who are the people in the community who are the cornerstones? Who are the people who have served others and provided the needs of the local community? And how do people's lives resonate with the Northern Saints? What can we learn from these saints? And what can we learn about each other in the process? So let me take you back to the start of the trail. So yesterday the tour began with David Pott along with the Bishop of Durham and his wife, along with other people who were walking from St Paul's Monastery in Jarrow, ending up in Sunderland, where I started today. Now, the monastery at St Paul's was one of the most important centres of learning and culture in the 7th and 8th centuries. What you see today, however, are the remains of the medieval monastery, which was built in the 11th century. However, inside the church you can actually find traces of the Anglo-Saxon monastery in the chapel. What's so significant about this place is the connection to Bede. Bede is known to be the sort of the father of the English language in many ways, and some of the earliest records of the English people were written by Bede. So Bede settled at St Peter's age 7 in the year 680, and he spent his life in the twin monastery of Wearmouth, Jarrow, which he described as one monastery in two places. If we go back to the Kingdom of Northumbria in the 7th century, it was an incredible place of cultural diversity, of global significance, of learning, philosophy, poetry, and so on. And Bede is known as the astronomer, the poet, the philosopher, the theologian, and in many ways all of those kind of traits play out in Jarrow. And of course music is absolutely part of that. And we have the roots of Western music lie in some of the music that was heard and sung in Jarrow. Whether that's the Gregorian chants that were brought over from Benedict Biscop, who spent a lot of time in Rome, or whether that's the music that came over from Winchcombe, from Aldwyn, who journeyed up in the 12th century to kind of rediscover and give life to the monasteries in the north of England. Music was also a form of entertainment, and there's some well-known examples of Anglo-Saxon poems such as Beowulf. You're now about to hear an example of Beowulf by the acclaimed performer Benjamin Bagby, recreating how this poem may have been heard in Anglo-Saxon times.
Beowulf hjärta he on bedstiger. Nå ich me on hervas mom nagan taliga gode werka von grendel hinne. Fodan ich hinne svärdes hebbanell aldrobeneotan der skall meja. Na, he had a gode, but he me on
So through Bede we also have access to what the Celtic music may have been like back in the 7th century. So in Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, he recounts how workers at Whitby Abbey used to take turns singing songs for entertainment, accompanied by a harp. And there's this famous phrase, which I love, which is "pass the harp." And I have this beautiful image of people sitting around in a circle, passing a harp, a little bit like we have storytelling sessions, around a campfire. And there's a great sense of how the harp becomes the mediator, moving around the group, allowing each member to participate and take part in the music. One of the most famous sections of Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People is when King Edwin, King of Northumbrians, calls a council of his wisest retainers to debate whether they should convert to Christianity. Bede reports that one of the men there, one of the king chief men, gave the following speech in which he compared man's life to that of a sparrow flying through a hall in winter. And this is my interpretation of it. This life, fellow pilgrim, seems to be in comparison with that which is unknown to thee, like the swift flight of a swallow passing through a room where you sit in supper in winter amid your officers and your ministers, lit by a fire and the feast of a banquet. Though the storms of rain and snow prevail, you are safe for a short space of time, but like the dark winter from which he does emerge, what comes before or what is to follow, we do not know. If this way offers something more grounding, it deserves to be followed. What's beautiful about this insight from Bede is it paints a picture of the times and the assimilation, but also sometimes the conflict between cultures. Here we have a very pagan kind of image of sitting inside a building with no windows, and sparrows and nature interceding, the harshness of the cold and the winter and the rain. But then there's a sparrow, and the reference to the new doctrine is obviously Christianity, which was a new kind of doctrine in those times. It was a new way of life, and it offered, in the case of this king, it offered some stability amidst the unknown answers and questions, amidst the unknown beginnings and the afterlife and so on. So we've now left Jarrow, and it's the second day, which is today, Monday the 17th of May, and we are leaving St Peter's in Monk Weymouth, and we're about to journey towards Chester Street. So as we leave Sunderland, this seems like a good time to talk about the rich tradition of folk music. And obviously Sunderland, known for its coal production and its shipbuilding and its maritime trade, all of the songs in some way do link to these histories. Now, obviously back in the day, before the internet and before records and CDs and computer downloads, the words of the songs, it was actually the broadsheets, the penny broadsheets, that would be capturing the story, the life of the day. And these often came out in stories and in songs. And they'd be sold on street corners by ballad sellers. Now there's so much to say about the places on this trail. We've had Sunderland, we've had Jarrow. Now this next story comes from a few miles north of Chester Street, Birtley. Now Birtley technically isn't on the way of learning, but I'm going to include it because it was a huge part of learning for me. And I discovered Birtley in the Stories of Sanctuary project, as I've mentioned earlier. And the project was all about discovering stories of sanctuary, so stories of people migrating to the northeast for whatever reason, whether it was the story of Cuthbert and arriving in the 10th century in 995 to Durham Cathedral after he had died and been on the journey for 100 years, or whether it was people who'd moved to the northeast through the coal trade, people who come from Wales and Suffolk and Scotland, or whether it's people who fled from war. So we have amazing stories from the early 20th century of people who'd fled from Belgium to find sanctuary in the northeast of England. And this next song I'm going to play to you actually connects the past. It connects St Cuthbert, who we haven't yet spoken about, but Cuthbert himself and his community after he died travelled around the northeast for over 100 years, settling in different places, including Chester Street. And of course Cuthbert now rests in Durham Cathedral. But his whole journey was one of pilgrimage, particularly the people, the community who were on the move, and there's a context of war there. We have the Vikings raiding Lindisfarne and parts of the northeast. So this community, nomadic community, were on the move. So there's Cuthbert's story, but there's also the story of Leon, whose grandfather came to Birtley in the year 1914, and his whole family came to the northeast because of this journey of sanctuary from war. In this case, it was World War I and the horrors of what happened in Belgium. But his story is told along another story, which is a more recent story that I discovered when doing the Stories of Sanctuary project, and that is the story of Kareem, who fled Syria due to the civil war, and he was only 18 when he left his family, and he journeyed across Europe. And in many ways his story and Leon's story from Birtley share so many things in common, whether it was fleeing war, the need for transport, the hunger, the experience, the memories of what they experienced along the way. So this is a story, and it's written as a song that I composed together to bring these different journeys of sanctuary together.
Thousand years ago, on an island in Northumbria, dragon ships arrived in the darkness of the night. Monks they did flee and took all their treasure, carry carefully the sleeping refugee.
Family in Belgium, they were confronted with the sudden invasion of Belgium way back in 1914.
Well, when I turned 18 years old, I had to leave my country because they wanted to take me to the war. You know, the the situation there. I couldn't stay there.
And suddenly, in the middle of their meal, there was a hammering on the door. There was a Scottish soldier standing there, and he said, get out now. You're in the front line." They just got up and they fled.
In Turkey, we had to cross to Greece on the sea, a small boat.
And that was the start of an 8 or 9 hour trek. They just kept going and going.
We had to walk 6 hours to get to Croatia.
Trudged and trudged and trudged across the north of France, desperately hungry. And they actually survived by eating raw potatoes out of the field.
I had one biscuit in my pocket.
With his body growing heavy, they took it as a sign to rest him on a hill that soon became a shrine. 100 years later, and it would be no, you could knock and you could find a safe place from the snow.
But from Munich in Germany, a city, I took a train to Paris, which is very dangerous if you don't have ID or you are illegally in this country. Because if the officer seen you on the train, big problem.
And he said, "Leo, this is the last train out of Belgium into France. Get into that cattle truck now."
I booked first class on the train, even dangerous. Accidentally, a girl from Romania sat next to me. I told her my story. I said, "Look, I am illegally, I'm in danger, I need your help. If the officer come here, ask for tickets, pretend like we are friends."
Had they missed that train, well, I wouldn't be here today.
And in these ancient streets, there's a heartbeat of sanctuary, all are pilgrims of a kind. In these stones you're not alone, there's a place to be. In the city of 1,000 years, in the city of 1,000 more. In the city of sanctuary.
We've been to Jarrow, we've passed through Sunderland, we've been to Chester Street, Burtley, and now we are at Finkel Abbey. Now Finkel Abbey is famous for Godric. Now Godric, who died on the 21st of May 1170, was a merchant turned hermit and a saint, and one of the first named English songwriters. At least the first songs in English for which the music survives. He was actually born in Norfolk, but after the Norman conquest became a merchant trader sailing to Scotland, Denmark and Rome, and he undertook several pilgrimages himself, and particularly visiting Cuthbert's Farne Islands. But he was drawn to the life of a hermit and eventually settled here at Finkel near Durham, where he lived for the last 60 years of his life. Now the song you're about to hear is a reconstruction of what it would have sounded like to hear Godric's song.
Sainte Maria, Virgine, Mare Jesu Christus, Nazarene, on foe, shield, health in God rich, on fanger, bring helice with therein Godes riche. Sainte Maria, Christes bor, Mairenes klenad, moderus flor, diliem in sinne, rix in min mor. bring me to winner with therein self a God.
So we come to the end of our lecture and our journey today. We have one more song for you, and this is a song that I wrote 3 weeks ago, and very recently, but it was written to reflect the spring, the easing of lockdown, and coming together to meet as a community. And this is a song that I wanted everyone to sing, enjoy, and to kind of accompany people's journey today. And I'm looking forward to pursuing more writing together. If you'd like to keep in touch with the work I do, you can find more on my blog, which is in the link below. I'll also put a link to Citizen Songwriters, the social enterprise that I run, and we're very much hoping that we can, through Citizen Songwriters, run more projects together with communities and inspire people to get out on the trails, and to support and enable communities to write the stories that matter to them, and to use these beautiful trails as a way of connecting with the landscape, connecting with each other, and connecting with God. So thank you once again, and enjoy the song.
Been the longest winter time. We've been locked down, locked inside, and now we're out with our backpacks on, and it's time to sing a new song. Setting off by the stained glass light, keep the river and the road in sight. Feel the gentle lift of spring, pray you feel it deep within. May you know the land that welcomes you afar. May you know the place that whispers in your heart. May you know the ones who dance with the lonely and outcast. May you know the light of the land of the northern saints. See the towers in the distant sky, see the colours of the changing light. Feel the prayers of the ones before, know their story, hear their call. Give your voice to Godric's song, sing like Chad till the storms are gone. Stare at stars with Father beat, swim the depth of Cuthbert sea. May you know the one who welcomes you afar. May you know the one who whispers in your heart. May you know the ones who dance with the lonely and outcast. May you know the light in the land of the northern saints.
Welcome, welcome everyone. Welcome your story and your song. Welcome to this place, may the sun shine on your face. Let me show you the light of the northern saints. Welcome, welcome everyone. Welcome your story and your song. Welcome to this place, may the sun shine on your face. Let me show you the light of the northern saints.
May you know the land that welcomes you afar. May you know the voice that whispers in your heart. May you know the ones who dance with the lonely and outcast. May you know the light in the land of the northern saints. May you know the light in the land of the northern saints. Give each other a virtual hug.